All right, so I'm going to talk about Paradise Row. As I mentioned, a very interesting part of Church Street that I don't think many people are aware of. We're going to see that it was very interesting for various reasons. If you ask yourself, where was Paradise Row? It's this small section of Church Street that today, you may not think much of it. It's a combination of old Georgian houses, Victorian houses, and then 1930s, 1950s council housing, and also an ongoing development that's taking place today. But when you look at it from this view, it doesn't look necessarily that interesting. But we're going to see that it used to look very different. There are actually some surviving houses of Paradise Row, 6 out of the 14. And as we're going to see, each of the houses in Paradise Row had a name. It was very kind of a respectable area, having a name attached to a house kind of was part of that whole atmosphere and kind of gave it a sense of identity, as we're going to see throughout. The reason for the title that I chose for this talk is because 102 years ago, a local historian named Francis Baxter gave a talk about Paradise Row in Edwards Lane called Paradise Row, a corner of Old Stoke Newington. So I thought 102 years later, I'll revive and bring it back to life. He was quite extraordinary. He almost basically did a PhD on Paradise Row. It's all in the Hackney archives. I transcribed all of this. So if you want to read the full in-depth analysis, get in touch. But you can see that he went into all the details of all the houses and all the residents that lived in Paradise Row. So as I said, for one night only, unless I do it in the next Hackney History Festival next year. So this is our kind of version after all these years. So this is a quote from Baxter when he talks about Paradise Row, and I think it's quite something that really resonates. So Paradise Row is a name which pleases the ear and at the same time arrests the attention. It calls to mind the age of innocence, the Garden of Eden, nay, heaven itself, and makes one think of the homes of the blessed. Because again, even the name Paradise Row, and we're going to see, was a very picturesque part of Stoke Newington. It was facing the New River and the park, not other houses and other shops. Today, it looks a bit different, and you wouldn't associate it necessarily with the name Paradise. So these are just some then and now comparisons. So we're going to talk about the Willows, this kind of 19-bedroom mansion that was on the corner of Clissold Crescent, where today there's this development. Some of the original houses, you can still spot them in that view, but otherwise it changed considerably. I always wanted to have like a panoramic view of Paradise Row because all the houses were unique architecturally. They had a very specific design, but there isn't one, so I had to create one. Okay, so this is something that I put together. It's based on photos from different angles, using AI to kind of come up with kind of the front elevation of the houses. In some cases, I had to also use some photoshopping because there was one extra window and the railings was in the wrong place. So I think I would say it's 90% plus, just to give you an idea of what the row used to look like. And I think the thing that really comes out is that every house is different, very, very different, very unique, had its own identity. And I think that's one of the appealing aspects of this part of Church Street. There's 6 houses today, 14%, which is 2, were rebuilt. I'll mention those. But all those from Paradise House all the way to the Willows, those were demolished in the 1930s and then the 1950s to make way for what became Kenaway Estate. If you want to go into a bit more detail, you can see that out of those 6 houses, 4 are Grade 2 listed. So those are kind of the Georgian ones. Bollington House and Glenavon House, Avon House are mid-Victorian, so they're not listed. But you can now see what's their current address. They used to be numbered Paradise Row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there was another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from the other direction. It was a bit confusing, but today you can clearly see that they've got their Church Street address. When you take a closer look at those houses from that kind of illustration, it's nice to see just how unique each one of them was. So you've got Ivy House, you've got Paradise House, you've got the Willows, you're going to look at Warwick House, Vincent House, Baxter Lodge. Let's see what Paradise Row looked in situ, actual photos of it. So this photo was taken from Clissold Park, looking at what today is the estate. So you can see, I kind of labeled them. So you see how lovely it was. And when you think about the name Paradise Row and this heavenly view that people had from both directions, actually, whether you were going and walking in the park or actually looking from one of those windows outside, it was a very picturesque, very pleasant view. This is another before and after, just to kind of allow you to kind of position all those houses, the new river that used to run along Church Street. And I think when you see that, it's easy to kind of see why it got its name. This is from the other angle. So we now imagine kind of came out of Clissold Crescent and you're walking down towards St. Mary's Church. So again, you've got the new river and you can see again the Willows, Warwick House, Vincent House, and Baxter Lodge, just kind of slightly sneaking out there with all the lovely railings, a lot of detail. As I mentioned, those houses were named. So in old photos, you can see you had Park House, you can see it in the kind of the Fenlight, Paradise House, Stoneleigh House. Some of those names, you can still spot them today. So Ivy House, even though it was rebuilt in the 1930s, the name is still there. Glen Avon House is still there. Grange House, even though it was rebuilt, it was The Grange. They renamed the new house Grange House, and Grafton House is also still there. So next time you go for a walk, have a look. Just to quickly see what Paradise Row used to look like back in the day. So this is the new river, and this is Paradise Row. This is now 1820. You can see Clissold House. Now we're at 1846. So you can see that it's still very rural, a lot of fields and meadows, but it's really Church Street that has now starting to get some of the shops, all the houses facing each other. But Paradise Row is almost kind of its own little island. There's nothing, there's the new river, there's all these fields surrounding it, and it was almost the kind of this very quiet, posh part of Church Street, where all the comers and the smaller houses, in most cases, were more in the middle. This is 1868, so you get a sense now of the landscaping and the footprint of all these lovely houses. I'm going to talk about some of the notable residents of Paradise Row. It's not all of them, but it's a very interesting mix of a geologist, an anthropologist, chemists, scientists, abolitionists, bankers, merchants, and even someone that lived to be 108, believe it or not, across 3 centuries. Now, when you think about the history of Paradise Row, you very quickly realize that it's all about Quakers. And this is a quote from Baxter, that it really talks about how, in many ways, Paradise Row was a Quaker colony. Because when you start looking at all the people that lived there and who they were married to and who they were in business with, you realize it was all connected. All these families, the Hoares, the Allen, the Hanbury, the Woods, and there's others as well, they were all interconnected. They weren't just neighbors, they worshiped together as Quakers, they married each other and the kids. Some of them lived in 3 houses along the row. Every time they got married, they just packed up and moved to the house next door, essentially. And when I put this together, I thought there's a great pitch to Channel 4. I reckon we can actually have a neighbor's special edition for Paradise Row. This is Charles Booth's poverty map. You can see that it was marked as upper middle and upper class as wealthy. So along with Church Row, this was the poshest part of Church Street. The biggest houses, the residents were bankers and merchants, very wealthy residents that, as we're going to see over time, by the 20th century, those big houses, you couldn't really use them for much, so they got demolished and replaced with council housing. It wasn't actually damaged during the war, not much, so there wasn't kind of mass destruction of any of the houses, quite light. We're going to see that some houses were already earmarked for demolition by the London County Council to build the council housing, but otherwise it survived the Blitz. This is, if you're looking at 1952, you can see now that half of the row is gone, replaced with what became Kenaway Estate, and the number of the original houses became smaller and smaller. And by 1971, it was the remaining parts of Paradise Row were sandwiched between Clissold Estate and Kenaway Estate, both by the London County Council. So that was the view. What I want to do now in the next sort of 15 minutes is just to go and kind of visit some of those houses, just give you a sense of who lived there, what they looked like. So we're going to kind of go as an actual little walking tour. We're going to start with the Grange, and we're going to finish with the Willows, which is just on the corner of Clissold Crescent. So this is the Grange, which is now Grange House. This is a view from 1929, and we're going to see that a lot of these photos of Paradise Row houses, there's always a sign about selling, letting, because by this point, in terms of the demographic changes in the area, finding someone that can actually move into a house with 9 bedrooms and 5 offices and studio space wasn't that easy. So either they became an educational institution or an office space or even a factory, otherwise they were demolished. This is just showing you kind of the footprint of the Grange and its lovely garden. So kind of the rear garden, you can see quite an interesting shape, but they managed to kind of squeeze it in. This is the view today. Some accounts say that the original building was altered significantly, but I did consult an expert and he kind of looked at it and he said, no way. Like maybe they kept the plumbing, but apart from that, there's nothing else, even kind of in terms of the footprint, in terms of anything from the original Grange that was kept. If you think otherwise, do let me know. But like I mentioned, they named the new house Grange House. This is from the sale catalog of the Grange, and I just highlighted just kind of what do you get for a house in Paradise Row. So 5 reception rooms, 9 bedrooms, spacious domestic offices, bathroom, right? So you can kind of see again why it was that very affluent, very desirable part of Stoke Newington and Church Street. This was the view from the Grange. This is also from the catalogue. So you had a view of the park. This is now basically where the paddling pool is, by the way, just in terms of the location. In terms of some of the interesting residents in the Grange, there were 2 brothers, the Tylers. So you had Alfred and then you had Edward. So we're going to see that Alfred was a geologist and Edward was an interesting anthropologist, quite pioneering in his field. They were Quakers, and we're going to see that almost all the residents that lived in Paradise Row were Quakers. A lot of times they were the successful merchants and bankers that could afford to live there. And as I mentioned, a lot of family connection, brothers moving in, people getting married, moving to the next house. Baxter actually makes a note, I couldn't verify this, but apparently the royal carriage was frequently seen outside the Grange when some of Queen Victoria's youngest children came to visit the Tyler family there. He didn't say who exactly, but apparently they visited frequently. There was a lot of, I guess, kind of space to play. Next, we're going to look at Stoke House. So this is the one that I'm sure most of you, when you look at it, you think it looks very odd. You know, there's all these windows and they don't really fit and it's not symmetrical. What's going on? We're going to look into that. So this is the view today. It was actually, there was some renovation taking place a few months ago. So this is what it looks like. But if you think that it looks like 2 houses, there's a very good reason for that, as you're going to see in a minute. This was the view back in the day. So you can see that it's number 4, that's Stoke House. But if you notice, there's only 5 windows. There's nothing else, because you actually had the original Ivy House, and you can see why it got its name, just in front of it. And as you're going to see, when they demolished Ivy House for road widening, then this whole new section of Stoke House became visible, and that's how you got those odd-looking windows. So this was the footprint of the original. So you can see exactly where Ivy House kind of goes in. That's where the new windows are now. Due to road widening in the 30s, they demolished the old Ivy House, built a new one, which is much smaller and further back from the road. So if you think that section of Church Street is narrow now, think what it used to be. It was basically a footpath. This is a view from Clissold Park that really gives you a sense of, this wasn't taken long after Ivy House was built or rebuilt. And you can see exactly what happened to Stoke House. Gained these new windows and a new entrance, but they didn't, I wouldn't think this will get through planning today. I don't think they thought about some sympathetic design that complements the original. I think they kind of got away with it, unfortunately. Could have been nice just to continue it. Now, I mentioned one of the residents of Paradise Row that lived to be 108. So this is Elizabeth Hanbury, and she actually lived in 3 different houses in Paradise Row. She was the OG Paradise Row. She lived in Warwick House, Stoneleigh House, and Stoke House. You can see the connection there that I'm going to mention as well with Cornelius Henry, her son, and there was also connection with William Allen that we're going to talk about. All these Paradise Row residents, they worked together, they worshiped together, they lived together, and there was a lot of these family connections. Next, Paradise House, one of the interesting ones, I think, in the row in terms of its kind of scale and design. This is 1930. You can often see those kind of to be sold because they were trying to kind of find people that could actually afford these houses during kind of the interwar years. But you can see that, as we're going to look in a minute, by this point it was actually a school for boys. This was the footprint with the rear garden. This is a view from the park in 1860. And if you, next time you go kind of towards, I guess, from Church Street to Green Lane, and you think, where was Paradise House? I'd love to stand exactly where Paradise House used to be. This is it, the location today. So Millington House was built on the site in the 30s. The land with the two adjacent houses, Downwood House and Baxter Lodge, was purchased by the London County Council to build 61 flats for council housing. Most of them probably would have been people that need to be rehoused because of slum clearance. So those old Georgian houses made way for council housing. You can see exactly where it used to be. I guess one of the most notable residents of Paradise House was Samuel Hord Jr. He was a Quaker banker, a very notable abolitionist, and there were quite a few in Stoke Newington. He was a banker and actually was involved with the bank that became, in a way, Lloyd's Bank today. You can see they even had the Black Horse logo. So if you ever wondered where it came from. And Samuel's brother, Jonathan, was the one who had Clissold House built. And he named it originally Paradise House after this house. So it was originally known as Paradise House. So there were two Paradise Houses, which I'm sure the postman wasn't too happy about. Another resident was William Allen that I mentioned. Again, an interesting character, was very industrious in many ways. He was a chemist, he was a pharmacist, he was a philanthropist. He was teaching Quaker girls in a school in 1824, where the fire station is today, at a time when girls could only dream of having sort of chemistry lessons and any sort of scientific lessons. So he would come down from Paradise Row to the school and teach there. And if you're familiar with the company Allen and Hanbury's, this is where it comes from. So William Allen, Cornelius Henry, you can see all those connections and all those businesses that came from this small section in Church Street. After it ceased being residential, it became a school. There's a lovely kind of school photo. You get a sense of the interior as well. You can see that at this point the school was actually Paradise House plus Glenavon House, which was adjacent to it. But again, those big houses, they either became, like I mentioned, offices, educational purposes. Otherwise, they didn't last long. This is a view of the school, and you can see the houses next to it. The view later, from I guess 1936 onwards, was this. So this is a view from Clissold Park, and what you can clearly see here is that this was the site of Paradise House, but also Downwood House and Baxter Lodge were demolished as part of this scheme, but still standing. You've got Vincent House, Warwick House, and the Willows, but they're not going to last long. They're going to survive the war, they're going to get used throughout and afterwards, but we're going to see that by 1953, they were gone. Next one is Vincent House, this kind of tall, skinny house. So you can see that in Paradise Row, there was room for everyone. You could be a Paradise House, you could be the Grange, or something more like this. This is a lovely view. You can exactly see again how these houses were lined up nicely together. This is basically where there was a bridge, so you could walk at this point and come out. There was a little gate on Church Street in the railings where Paradise Bridge was. So as the New River exited the park under Church Street, you could also just come out. And this was a point where you get quite a few photographs where the photographer just stands there and captures that picturesque view. This is Vincent House. You can see again, a bit more modest. So this was, if you only wanted the 4 bedrooms in Paradise Row, this was the affordable option, Vincent House. One of the most notable residents of Vincent House was Joseph Jackson Lister. He invented the achromatic microscope lens, which really was extremely significant in the study and sort of science, and allowed people for the first time to see tiny cells in a way they couldn't before. His son is also very notable as the father of modern surgery, and his nephew was Joseph Beck, who was also a very notable manufacturing optician, and he was also the chief campaigner to save Clissold Park in the 1880s. So a lot of very interesting connections between all these families. They were very motivated. All of them were interested in various causes, whether it's the abolition of slavery, saving open spaces. This is the view today. So this is Vincent House. Yeah, if you wanted to go and pay your respects. And this is what I mentioned from the same photo. So you can see that Garland House was built on the site of Vincent, Warwick, and the Willows. They got demolished, and that was in 1952. And with that was really kind of the end of that whole section of Paradise Row. A few years ago, they did some digging, I think when they maybe put that little structure, and as I walked past, I realized that you could actually see what I believe were maybe sort of the foundations of Vincent House. And if you want to know, I didn't get one of those bricks. No, I didn't. Should have, probably. We only have two more, and that's it for me. So next to it was Warwick House. Really lovely, really interesting house. This is a view from 1930. And you can see again, to be sold. Yeah, Paradise Row was disappearing. The paradise was gone. It had a very interesting rear garden. I would have loved to see the description by the estate agent describing, handsome house, blah, 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 and a peculiarly designed rear garden through a magical corridor, only 1 meter wide. But that's it. I don't know, was it even safe to go there at night? I mean, you wouldn't really try. This is the site of Warwick House today. A notable resident of Warwick House was Joseph Woods, Jr. He was also Quaker. He was an architect, botanist, and a geologist. He's sometimes credited as being the architect of Clissold House for his uncle, Jonathan Hoare, but he would have been about 17 at the time. So some sources say, look, was it like a school project? Was he really gifted? Or maybe he was just too young to have actually designed it. But in some places, you might see that Joseph Woods is described or sort of attributed as the architect of Clissold House. In terms of Warwick House, it's interesting to see that it became the War Relief Toy Works. So it became a charity providing work for disabled ex-servicemen and their dependents. Their kind of flagship toy was this sort of Noah's Ark. Again, you can see that, as I mentioned, these houses either became factories, schools, and so on. The last one that I'm going to talk about is the Willows, by far the most impressive houses in Paradise Row. If you thought that the Grange, with its 9 bedrooms, wait till you see the Willows. It was a proper mansion. Believe it or not, we used to have that on Church Street, on the corner of Clissold Crescent. So if you come outside, and then you've got the New River Cafe right next door. Proper mansion, 19 bedrooms. 19. Now, when you hear that, that's what I said. What? Why would you need 19 bedrooms? And for a long time, I did think it was a bit of a mystery. I mean, that's a bit excessive. And we're going to see exactly why. One of the striking features of the Willows was this conservatory entrance, and it was tiled from inside, but it was this sort of triangle shape with kind of the glass kind of ceiling. Very distinct, very interesting. But it was this whole set. Now, if you think that the Willows as a house was big, you know those rear gardens that we saw from some of those other houses? This was the rear garden of the Willows. It's effectively a park, right? And you can see now, by the way, why Clissold Crescent is Crescent, because the estate had this shape. And today, somewhat different. But that was the Willows. That was Stoke Newington. All right, and that, like I said, that mansion survived till 1953, 51 in some sources. So what's the story of the Willows? So the Willows was built by George William Alexander, again, a Quaker, again, an abolitionist. You can see this is the view from the rear garden, by the way. And he actually built this house because it was designed to be a refuge. It wasn't just 19 bedrooms for him and his mates staying overnight after like a long kind of evening out. It was actually intended to offer shelter for political refugees, people escaping slavery, and other sort of types of persecution. So this is very much in keeping with Stoke Newington's history, heritage, legacy. But it's quite amazing to see that there was actually this entire house, entire mansion devoted just for that. Some of the notable visitors to the Willows. So you had Alphonse de Lamartine, who was a French poet and a leading figure in the 1848 revolution in France. So he paid a visit, maybe came to try the New River Cafe and their set breakfast. And you also had Harriet Beecher Stowe, American abolitionist and the author of Uncle Tom's Cabin, came to stay at the Willows. This is the site today, somewhat different. And like all the other houses pretty much in Paradise Row, once it basically stopped being residential, it was used for educational, charitable purposes. So it was a training college, and it was actually renamed Canaway Hall after Sir John Canaway, the president of the Church Missionary Society. It was also used by the local authority during World War II. And you can see there was the boroughs of civil defense engineering, the shelter depot, materials yard, welfare center. This is a photo from 1921 of the Canaway Hall staff and trainees. This is the interior. And now you can see that this is a view now from probably the very early 50s as it was demolished and Garland House was being built on the site. And this is, next time you see the name, Canaway Estate, now you know where it comes from. This is the end of our tour of Paradise Row. Hopefully you had a nice kind of little journey and kind of thinking what that part used to look like. So just as closure, like I said, 102 years ago, Francis Baxter gave his talk. Tonight, I gave my talk. I can only hope that in 102 years from now, in a colony on Mars, New Stoke Newington Colony 5, someone will give this talk again. We won't be there, but maybe our kind of great grandkids will be there to enjoy it. Thank you very much.